Our next speaker is Dr. Giancarlos Lucchetti. Dr. Lucchetti is an assistant professor of medicine at the Federal University of Juiz de Fora, Brazil, specializing in internal medicine, and also completed fellowship training in geriatrics. He received his PhD in neurology, neurosciences from the Federal University of Sao Paulo, Brazil. Dr. Lucchetti is a volunteer research collaborator with the Brazilian Medical Spiritist Association. He has published several articles on spirituality and health in index journals, and has also served as reviewer for several international peer-reviewed scientific journals. Please welcome Dr. Giancarlos Lucchetti.
Well, first I would like to thank for this invitation and congratulate for this wonderful Congress. I'm learning a lot these days. And today I'm going to talk about the pineal gland. It's a chronological study across times and cultures. Okay. This presentation is included in an article that we have published recently in Neuroendocrinology Letters in 2013, talking about the historical and cultural aspects of the pineal gland, a comparison between the theories provided by Spiritism in the 40s and the current scientific evidence. We were very happy with this article because it's a mainstream neuroendocrinology journal and we have published a controversial issue like that. So I'm going to present to you a little bit about this article, but this article is open access, it's free in the internet. If you search at the Google or some searcher, you can find the whole article. Well, this is the pineal gland. It's formally called the epiphysis. It's basically a structure with a mass of around 0.5 grams, which protrudes from the posterior aspect of the diencephalon. This tiny structure is responsible for a lot of different mechanisms, and it regulates a lot of different aspects of our organism. So I will show some of these properties of the pineal gland. Well, in a brief introduction, in a time a little over a decade, 54 to 65, the pineal gland was recognized as an active neuroendocrine transducer. Currently, this tiny structure is one of the most studied by modern science. Knowledge regarding especially its structure and functions is rapidly growing at an impressive pace. So a significant meaning has been attached to the pineal gland in numerous different cultures and beliefs. Its role has been constantly described by thinkers, mystics, philosophers, and religious figures. One religion that has advanced the role of the pineal gland is Spiritism. I will briefly talk about Spiritism in order to you understand a little bit about this way of thinking and this religion. Well, Spiritism consists of a collection of philosophical and scientific ideas and religious doctrines, and it was founded in France by Allan Kardec in 1857. It basically adopts a dualistic concept of human beings. So, in Spiritism, we are immortal spirits that temporarily inhabit physical bodies for several necessary incarnations in order to attain moral and intellectual improvements. It also implies a possible beneficent or maleficent influence of the spirits over incarnate humans. Although of European origin, Spiritism spread widely in Brazil, where it's currently the third most popular religion in number of followers. This impressive popularity is due to several factors in Brazil, especially for the work of a medium, a channeler, called Francisco Cândido Xavier, also known as Chico Xavier, who, despite the limited schooling, he has 3 years of education, he penned over 460 books that were attributed to various spirits. This is a picture of Francisco Cândido Xavier psychographing a book. And in this study, we focus on this work, on the work of Francisco Cândido Xavier, particularly to the books attributed to the spirit called André Luiz, that was allegedly a physician in a past life in Brazil, who authored some books containing information of scientific nature in the field of medicine. So this is a book with medical content through the hands of the medium. The most notable of these books is Missionaries of Light. I think Sonia Doi has already presented this book in her presentation, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about this book. It was translated to English. We have here in the bookstore. And the second chapter in this book is entitled The Pineal Gland. So at that time, the pineal gland was overlooked by the science, underestimated by the science. Here are some books of Francisco Cândido Xavier. So, Missionaries of Light, In the Greater World, And Life Goes On, Nosso Lar, and The Messengers. And there are a lot of other books written by Francisco Cândido Xavier. So, the present study aims to compile information on the pineal gland, drawn from the psychographed books by Chico Xavier, and carry out a critical analysis of their scientific basis by comparison with evidence from the relevant scientific literature. I'm going to talk briefly about the methods used. We first performed a review of the works that were allegedly authored by this spirit, the André Luiz spirit, written through the psychography by Chico Xavier. This so-called spirit was chosen for having produced several publications on the mechanisms and functions of the pineal gland. Well, we decided to include all the titles included in the Life in the Spirit World. Life in the Spirit World is a collection that embraces 13 volumes. All were allegedly dictated by the spirit André Luiz. We analyzed the book passages, especially those containing information referring to the pineal gland. And we have scanned all the collection and saw the contents using the Acrobat reader with the unit terms, pineal and epiphysis. So we search all terms that have these keywords. After selecting and counting the unit terms matches, we opted to read all chapters in which the terms appeared for the subsequent analysis of this information. All information potentially related to the field of medicine and all the current studies, the evidence-based studies here, was included. Finally, endocrinologists, neurologists, neuroscientists, general clinicians, and scholars of the Spiritist arena were recruited to compile the information and compare it side by side with the evidence from the scientific literature. Now I'm going to present some of our findings. Here are some of the results of our systematic search for the unit terms in all the different books from André Luiz. Here is the year of publication. We saw that the first book was Nosso Lar, Our Home, 1943. And here is Epiphysis and Pineal Gland. So we found 24 unit terms of epiphysis and pineal gland 5 times in all the collection of André Luiz. After compiling the information, we found that the topics addressed by this spirit author were information on the spiritual connection of the pineal gland, 7 passages, mental health, 6 times, reproductive function, 4 times, endocrine function, 4 times, criticism of a theory that the organ exerts no function, 2 passages, physical activity, 1 passage, and the description of a hormone secreted by the gland, 1 passage. I will now present some special topics such as mental health, physical activity, and compare with the historical background, the Spiritist view, and the current scientific evidence. Well, first I will start with mental health. The historical background of mental health in the 40s is basically this one. The role of melatonin in mental health was first seen in early reports from the 17th and 18th centuries, linking this gland to madness. So they believe the pineal gland was responsible for madness. Only after 1958 did experimental studies start to confirm the link between melatonin and mental health. In the 40s, the Spiritism showed that the pineal gland could be responsible for mental health instead of mental madness. So the passages analyzed point to a strong relationship between the pineal gland and the individual's mental health. I will read some of the passages of the book. So André Luiz makes clear that the pineal gland is the gland of mental life. It presides over the neural phenomena of the emotions, acts as the controller of the world of emotions, and is the most advanced laboratory of a human being's psychic elements. In fact, the current scientific evidence points to a strict relationship between melatonin, pineal gland, and mental health. So, this relationship, a remote and futuristic notion for the 40s, has been increasingly advocated based on a number of studies investigating melatonin. The current evidence reveals a relationship between the pineal gland and mental health, including the role of melatonin receptor agonists for the treatment of depression. So, the role of the pineal gland in individuals' mental health, however, is not yet fully elucidated. There are hundreds and thousands of papers addressing this issue, and the current scientific evidence is becoming stronger about this relationship. Endocrinology function. Given a historical background, in 1898, Hubner was the first to describe this connection about the endocrine function and pineal gland. He reported a case of a boy with a pinealoma and early puberty. However, it was only in 1943 that Bargmann studied the pineal gland of mammals and suggested the possible role of the organ in regulating the hypothalamus function. In the 40s, the Spiritism has some views about that. André Luiz stated, secreting subtle psychic energies, the pineal maintains control over the entire endocrine system. The epiphysis, akin to a small bluish sun, holds all the other bodies within its magnetic field, from the hypophysis, the pituitary, to the area of the ovaries, like a life star. The epiphysis, hypophysis, thyroid, parathyroids, thymus and adrenals, pancreas, and the genetic sacs were perfectly characterized against a living backdrop of perispiritual centers, which interact in harmony with one another. So he points to the connection between the neuroendocrine function of the pineal gland. The current scientific evidence points to the pineal gland as having an active role in this integrative process of the neuroendocrine system. The pineal gland exhibits characteristics of neuroendocrine transduction and integration. The books analyzed, although not employing a scientific language, appear to yield endocrinologic information about the pineal gland and its main hormone, melatonin, that closely mirrors the findings in the current scientific literature. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about reproductive system. Given a historical background, the relationship of the pineal gland with the human reproduction dates back to the mid-1900s, when Hubner reported that a tumor of the human pineal gland altered the pubertal development. These findings were not sufficiently compelling to convince most, if any, of the reproductive biologists that the pineal gland and the reproductive system were functionally linked. In the 40s, Spiritism carried some views about this. So, in its capacity as controller of the world of the emotions, its action in sexual experience is basic and absolute. During the period of childhood development, the readjustment phase for this important center of the pre-existent perispiritual body, the epiphysis, seems to restrain the manifestation of sex. The chromosomes in the seminal sac cannot escape the pineal gland's absolute and determined influence. So this is the vision of the Spiritism in the 40s. And this is the current scientific evidence. So in the 40s, when the book under analysis was written, the information available on this correlation was extremely scanty and highly conflicting. Nowadays, various different studies have linked melatonin production with fertility. Pinealocytes also express receptors both for the LH and GHRH, so pointing this connection to the reproductive function. In conclusion of this connection, this relationship between the pineal gland and the human reproductive system is strong, being backed by solid contemporary evidence. As mentioned earlier in this section, this relationship was first suspected in the beginning of the 20th century, but rejected by scientists of that time due to studies with inconsistent results. Talking about physical activity, given a historical background, it's unclear exactly when the link between this pineal gland and physical exercise was first reported. However, the first studies showing that the exposure of rats to various types of stress, increasing therefore catecholamines in the bloodstream, led to increased melatonin levels in plasma and in the pineal gland, date back to the late 70s and early 80s, so after the books were published. In the 40s, Spiritism, André Luiz stated this sentence: as a means of combating the potential dangers of the excessive accumulation of neuroenergies, as the electrical secretions of the epiphysis are called, they have advised the youths of all countries to practice rolling, ball games, jumping, pole vaulting, and running. So pointing to this connection between physical activity and the pineal gland. What the current scientific evidence tells us? According to a recent review, physical exercise acts as a Zeitgeber. The impact of exercise on the rhythm of melatonin secretion was found to vary depending on the time of the day. on the intensity of light and how closely the exercise coincided with the circadian production of melatonin. However, the role of physical exercise in melatonin secretion remains controversial. In conclusion of this section, despite only one rather generic sentence appears in this book on the possible connection, possible relationship between the pineal gland and physical activity, it's noteworthy that this relationship was not even embraced by the scientific literature in the 40s. The current evidence holds that the exercise and melatonin effect appears to exert a favorable influence on several systems of the human body. Nevertheless, of course, further studies are needed. In the book, there is also a description of a possible hormone secreted by the gland. Given a historical background, in the first half of the 20th century, the notion that the pineal gland might be responsible for endocrinology function and for producing a kind of hormone has been already established. However, it was only in 1958 that Lerner has isolated melatonin. The vision held by Spiritism in the 40s, according to the book The Missionaries of the Light, the pineal gland secretes the psychic hormones or power units, which act positively on the generative energies. This passage suggests the role of the hormone melatonin produced by the pineal gland, which may be alluding for the role of the melatonin in the regulation of energy. It's very interesting because the current scientific evidence, as I told you previously, melatonin was first isolated by Lerner in 1958. It was 13 years after the so-called revelation was written by the so-called Spirit. And in recent years, evidence has emerged confirming the role of this hormone in mitochondrial oxidative stress. In conclusion of this section, the passage just mentioned clearly describes the role of the pineal gland in the secretion of physical hormones, emphasizing the endocrinology function of this gland. Speculation that the hormone alluded to was what later became known as melatonin, isolated 13 years later, 13 years after the book Missionaries of Light was published, although plausible, should be viewed tentatively. Finally, most passages talk about a connection with a spiritual world. The historical background, we know very well that the Hindu philosophy and Vedic medicine, written some 5,000 years ago, described the pineal gland as the sixth chakra and a so-called window to the spiritual world. Descartes, a greater philosopher, described the pineal gland as the principal seat of the soul. This is the vision held by Spiritism in the 40s. André Luiz also defined the role of the pineal gland and the connection as a connector with the spiritual world. Here are some passages. You can see that every glandular center is an electrical power source. In any type of mediumistic practice, the pineal gland plays the most important role, showing this connection with the spiritual world. It's in the epiphysis that human beings' new sense lies. However, in most people, the divine potentially still sleeps in an embryonic state. So, identifying this structure as very important to communicate with the spiritual dimension. I will show some of the current scientific evidence. Of course, we don't have in this field a lot of evidence, but we have some very interesting studies that I will show you here. In fact, the association between spirituality and the pineal gland has been consistently reported throughout the history of civilization. However, only in recent years has the research confirmed this association. I would say not confirmed, but supported this association. Recent studies support the long-standing speculation that the pineal gland plays an important role in the intrinsic awareness which might concern the spirit or soul. The first of these studies found that the pineal gland was activated during religious meditation. The second one found that it was activated during a Chinese original quiet sitting. It's a type of meditation with a spiritual connection. The third showed that a modality of spiritual meditation elevated nighttime salivary melatonin levels, pointing to a connection between this spiritual connection and melatonin. While the fourth showed that the gland was only activated during meditation involving spiritual connection, compared to those meditations that does not involve this spiritual connection, breathing meditations, etc. So the Spiritist works analyzed point to the evidence of the relationship between the pineal gland and a spiritual connection. To sum up, as a conclusion, upon analysis of this information, the author has basically summarized the importance of the pineal gland under 6 main items. The first one, pineal gland is responsible for governing the world of emotions, point to this relationship with mental health. Maintains control over the entire endocrine gonadal system, point to the endocrinology function. Commands subconsciousness power under the direct determination of the will. Supplies all the autonomous storage areas of the organs with psychic energy. It's the gland of mental life, and it has the function, it has a primordial function in the mediumship, in the connection with the spiritual world. However, we found that some important functions of the pineal gland were not addressed in these books. For instance, the role of the gland in sleep and chronobiology, that's very important today, was not addressed in these books of André Luiz. Well, nonetheless, it's very interesting that the fact that a text written by an unlearned individual without any scientific and academic training or involvement in the field of health, who resided in the hinterlands of Brazil during a time when the access to articles, there was no internet, and the access to books, articles was very limited. That was the case of Francisco Cândido Xavier. And yet he provides highly complex concepts and information on the psychology of the pineal gland 60 years before any scientific confirmation, raises, in our opinion, deeper questions about the true source of this information. We have some hypotheses I would like to share with you. Of course, the first hypothesis is that the author acquired knowledge from books and articles available in the 40s detailing the physiopathology of the pineal gland and published before the isolation of melatonin. He shall created these theories himself, I don't know, and wording them in non-specific language, thus allowing them to appear to be supported by subsequent advancements in science. The second hypothesis proposes a mere coincidence. That's coincidence of findings, whereby the author randomly created several theories surrounding the pineal gland, many of which happen to be confirmed by scientific evidence. And the third hypothesis centers on this communication with spirits that have brought forward future findings related to the pineal gland. The aim of the investigation, however, was not to draw hasty conclusions based on unsubstantiated evidence. The article provides an analysis of the knowledge that the scientific community can acquire from the history of humanity and from science itself. The process of formulating hypotheses and scientific theories can benefit from observing cultural aspects of civilization, taking into account the so-called non-traditional reports and theories. So, this was very interesting because we found a highly correlation between the scientific evidence and the books produced by Spiritism in the 40s. And we believe that, as Dr. Burrega told us, we need more research in this field, and the science will become a new science if we can discover this relationship, this mind-brain relationship. This is my email. If you'd like to contact me to ask for the article, the full text article, I can send you, but you can find it in the internet, in the Neuroendocrinology Letters, that it was the journal that we published. This is Juiz de Fora. That's a very beautiful place. If you have opportunity to go to Brazil, I will invite you all to Juiz de Fora. Thank you very much.